Good morning, we've arrived. That's right, we are not in Wyoming anymore. We are long gone from Utah. And, well, we're not in Washington, D.C., we're actually in Rapid City, South Dakota, which was really established for modern times in the 1870s. General George Custer led an expedition here coming for gold, and that's really what brought in the population at first. I like this Elks Theater down here. Look at this, Back to the Future Part 2. Rapid City is now known as the City of the Presidents, and that's because of all the presidential statues you will find in Rapid City. Here is the former governor of California and President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. And of course, across the street we see George Washington, and you'll find these guys tucked all around the town. And really, the inspiration for this, of course, is nearby Mount Rushmore. Now, right here is the hotel that I'm staying at, the Alex Johnson. And they got a really good deal because of what's going on in the world today. It was less than half price, way less than half price. I'll tell you more about this place later. Let's go see who that is across the street. What president is kitty corner from the Alex Johnson? Why, it's Andrew Johnson. One of the worst presidents in United States history. Across the street, the other way, it looks like that's Jimmy Carter greeting us. Indeed it is. And while it's a statue of Jimmy Carter greeting us, I had an experience just a moment ago, which we don't have back home too often, at least I don't. And that is an elderly man driving by, saw me taking pictures, and he said, "Welcome to Rapid City." I said, "Well, thank you, it's beautiful." He says, "It's windy today, but it's gonna be nicer tomorrow. Have a great visit." I love it. One of my favorite things is the friendliness that I'm finding in a lot of American cars, which makes me happy as well. So we have Ronald Reagan, George Washington, Jimmy Carter, whose wife I shook hands with once, and Andrew Johnson. 2.5 out of 4 isn't bad. Beautiful buildings. You know, so many Western cities that grew up in the late 1800s and early 1900s kind of have a similar vibe. And this place reminds me much of Napa, where I lived in junior high and high school before it became such a tourist destination. The store seems similar, just reminds me a lot of my teenage. Let's see who we have on these four corners. Anyone recognize this guy? That, of course, is Bill Clinton. Across the street, I believe that is Eisenhower. Let's find out. Oh my gosh, I am so wrong. No offense to the sculptor. I can tell now it is Gerald Ford, University of Michigan, president after Richard Nixon left office, and his doggy. Let's cross the street. I'm gonna guess, based upon his diminutive stature, that is the author of our Constitution, at least of the Virginia Plan version, James Madison. Let's find out if I'm right this time. Well, he is little. Oh, I got this one right. Thank you, Mr. Madison. You gave us a lot. I hope we can hold on to it. In the words of, I believe that was Benjamin Franklin. Jefferson? Let's find out. Jefferson. And no offense to the author once again, but the clue was this. Okay, I won't rate that corner and show you my political prejudices here. I like a couple. All right, let's go explore the Alex Johnson a little bit, the place I'm lucky to be staying at and normally could not afford. So before we actually explore the interior of this amazing hotel, though, I kind of want to talk about some other history that really got me interested in the hotel, and it goes back to one of Alfred Hitchcock's amazing movies, North by Northwest. And Alfred Hitchcock was probably the greatest director of movies of all time, at least in my opinion, at least the greatest American director. And this 1959 movie starred Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint, along with James Mason, who, by the way, if you know who the Go-Go's are, he's the father-in-law of Belinda Carlisle, who was the lead singer in that group. The music for this movie was done by Bernard Herrmann, one of Hitchcock's favorites. And the movie starts in New York City but makes its way to South Dakota. It's a case of mistaken identity. It ends at Mount Rushmore. And the main character, played by Cary Grant, checks into the Hotel Alex Johnson in Rapid City, South Dakota, before heading to Mount Rushmore and all the scenes that are there. Now, the cast actually stayed at this hotel. It's one of my favorite movies, so it's really cool that I was able to stay in this hotel. This movie is actually what got me excited about Mount Rushmore. The postcards that I had seen Mount Rushmore kind of bored me, but when I saw the movie, I'm like, man, I've got to get there. And when I found out that it was possible for A and me to stay in the hotel, that, wow, that's going to be amazing. And so this is really a very, very cool stop for me personally. Now, on the wall in the lobby of the hotel, you can see some of the famous people who stayed here, and many of them were presidents and actors. And that's great, but what interests me most is actually the hotel itself. Look at this lobby. Now, the guy who built the hotel was the vice president of the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. His name was Alex Carlton Johnson, and it's his name that's given to the hotel. Construction began in 1927. The hotel opened on July 1st, 1928, not long before the Great Depression started. Now notice the amazing Lakota Sioux details in the artwork and what the artisans created here. Mr. Johnson loved Lakota Sioux culture. He respected the Native Americans here, and he hired many Native Americans to create much of the interior. And here you can see we're looking out the window of the hotel and getting ready to head towards Mount Rushmore, which was built by Gutzon Borglum. He was the Danish-American sculptor who did this, and he actually started working on Mount Rushmore the same summer that they actually opened the Alex Johnson Hotel. Now, we intentionally took the long way to Mount Rushmore, and we stopped along the way. And as you can see, there's a good reason for stopping. Just absolutely beautiful scenic areas to take in God's creation, just absolutely amazing. But the path that we took is called the Iron Mountain Road, also known as Highway 16A. It's 17 miles in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and it was designed not as a quick route to get to Mount Rushmore, obviously, but as an artistic unveiling of the great monument itself. There are tunnels, switchbacks, and they lead to amazing reveals of both nature and the monument itself, framed by trees and by tunnels and things like that. The curves and switchbacks intentionally limit your speed to 35 miles per hour, which kind of forces you to take in Gutzon Borglum's amazing sculpture as well as the nature itself, and it allows you to better appreciate the artistry both of God and of man. And there are many places to get out and enjoy this along the way. We accidentally took this path in 2010. There was no way I was going to miss it in 2020. It starts in Custer State Park to the south and then heads to Mount Rushmore to Gutzon Borglum's creation. Now, we're looking at a bust of Gutzon Borglum himself, and he was a Danish American. The interesting thing about Gutzon Borglum is in the past he had actually struggled with racism and anti-Native American sentiment, and yet in choosing this location he worked with Native Americans to pick the best spot, and he would not pick a spot until Native American tribal leaders of the Lakota Sioux approved it. And he also ended up putting up a couple guys who were known for their opposition to racism, including Theodore Roosevelt, who was the first president to honor an African American at the White House, as well as a man who struggled against racism his whole life. Theodore Roosevelt was staunchly opposed to racism. But anyway, Gutzon Borglum, interesting guy in his own right. And his sister, this is just on a personal note, his sister was an educator in Southern California, and my grandfather went to her school, and he remembered hearing her give updates about the progress and the plans and the things that her brother was doing. Now, Gutzon Borglum oversaw creation of Mount Rushmore from the late 1920s, as we mentioned, to 1941. He died in March of 1941. His son Lincoln, great first name, continued the work and oversaw the work until it finished in October. And of course, 2 months later, we would enter World War II. And as we see here, it depicts Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt. The heads are 60 feet tall. They represent, in Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt, birth, growth, development, and preservation of the United States of America. About 2 million people a year visit this spot, and some people have to sit down, like my son right here who's waving hello to us. It's amazing as you walk the grounds here, though, to see along the pathway different reveals, once again, that focus on one or two of the specific presidents here. And you might have noticed in the shirt I was wearing, I definitely have a favorite, although all 4 of these guys are amazing in giving us the freedom that we have, and 3 of them are my top 3 presidents for sure. That's just my own personal opinion. Now, as we leave Mount Rushmore, you probably noticed that we visited what was known as the Artist Studio, where we were able to see an early model of Mount Rushmore, as well as some of the tools and equipment they used in creating the monument. Our next stop was supposed to be the Badlands National Park. Unfortunately, we discovered that we were driving on Native American land, but we didn't discover that right away. It was a route that was suggested to us, but soon we came to a checkpoint where we were stopped and turned around by a Native American group of guards, I guess you'd say, who were denying access along the road due to the COVID pandemic. So we turned around and headed back to a spot that we had visited 10 years before near Rapid City, a wild animal park. And this wild animal park is known as Bear Country, USA, which is kind of a funny name because it makes me think of Disneyland and the old Bear Country Jamboree that used to be there. And I believe in Florida they still have one. But anyway, this is a real bear. This is better than anything Disneyland ever had. You actually get to stay in your car and drive through the park where you see a bunch of animals, wolves, as well as bears, rams. Really cool. I especially like the ram enclosure section that we drove through. Seeing the mascot of my favorite NFL football team in person, it's a pretty impressive beast. You don't think of rams as being very impressive, but seeing them in person, it was pretty cool. But a great, great trip. It reminded me of when I was a kid. We used to be able to drive through something called Lion Country, which was in what is today Irvine, and it's no longer there. Of course, there's houses and condos. That's basically what Irvine does. But back in the day, you could do that in Orange County. But in South Dakota, they still have a wild animal park. And we enjoyed seeing the bears and all the other animals. And once we had finished driving through the park itself, there was another enclosure that you could walk through to see some of the little bear cubs and some of the other animals that you could get closer to. And I'll stop talking and you can just kind of enjoy some of what we saw, including a bear taking a bath right here. Well, they're super cute, but I'm going to say goodbye before they get too big and scary. And we're going to head back to Rapid City. And as the sun's starting to go down, we're going to take a stroll through the downtown area of Rapid City, which reminds me a lot of when I was younger in Northern California, just the way the town is laid out. In fact, it could be the 1980s here with the movie they're showing, Back to the Future, actually Back to the Future too. And we're going to journey looking for who I believe to be the greatest president, at least one of the 2 greatest presidents, as well as who I believe to be the worst president of all time. And it's none of the guys we've seen so far. And actually, William Howard Taft, who we see here, is depicted with a baseball because he was the first president to throw out a baseball to start the baseball season. And here is my least favorite president, Andrew Jackson. Sorry, I don't mean to get too political, but he fought to expand slavery heading west. He stole Native American land, he ignored the Constitution, and that's as controversial as I'll get. And here we see John F. Kennedy with his son, known affectionately as John John. You can see in his hand, he has a little airplane toy. It's very cute. Whatever your politics, it's a cute statue here. All the presidents represented here in downtown Rapid City, South Dakota. See if you can guess who these presidents are. You have any idea? How about that one? You got to know who that is. Of course, Abraham Lincoln. And then looking across the intersection, there's a president on every corner here. And here he is. Here's who we've been searching for. Well, there shouldn't have been any doubt, but yep, we're going to save the best for last. Here I am with the statue of Theodore Roosevelt. We are going to spend our last night here in South Dakota, in Rapid City, and then Aiden and I are going to hit the road. I hope you enjoyed the trip and that it inspired you to get out there and discover America. God bless you, and see you down the road.
Thank you for watching. Tune in next time to see what we have, and love your cat or dog, whatever.